We dedicate this week of the NC F&B podcast to a two-part series celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Triangle Wine Experience, benefiting the Frankie Lemmon School.
You're listening to the NC F&B podcast, part of the OG Podcast Network. The NC F&B podcast takes you behind the scenes of North Carolina's food and beverage industry. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at NCFBpod. This episode sponsored in part by Food Scene. That's foodseen.com, providing professional photography, social media management, video production, and website design. And now, enjoy the show.
Let's drink to that. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, wow.
Cheers.
So we are back.
Yeah, at the Triangle Wine Experience trade tasting, and we have another winner over here out from the Sonoma Coast visiting Ms. Jasmine Hirsch of Hirsch Vineyards.
Awesome to be here, guys.
Yeah, right on.
Thank
This is
you.
cool. It's fun to have you on the show. We met because of the Triangle Wine Experience about 3 years ago. I don't know if you remember meeting me, but I was running a restaurant at the time.
Of
you
course
came in.
she does.
I know. You
Who
wrote about
forgets
it.
Max?
You wrote
can't
about it in your diary.
Unforgettable.
But we tasted some of your wines, and I thought they were great. And I always have thought they were great through the generations, right? I mean, you were running the show now, but you took over for your dad. Is that right?
Correct. The winery. My father still takes care of the vineyards.
Okay, yes. But Hirsch, I see popping up all over the place. You've been a supporter of the Triangle Wine Experience, at least in my knowledge, over the last few years. What brought you to do that?
Well, local chef Ashley Christensen.
You're fully embracing the localness wearing the Beasley's chicken and waffle hat. So,
Well,
yeah.
there you go.
Continue.
I love me some Beasley's. Well, I came to North Carolina because of my distributor, who the first night I got here, he took me to Pools. He said, "This is where you got to go in order to understand what's happening right now in Raleigh with food."
Yeah.
And this was about 8 years ago, I want to say. And I met Ashley for the first time, and shortly after that, she said, "Hey, you got to come back. We throw this great party called the Triangle Wine Experience, and we have a really good time." And I thought, well, this lady seems pretty cool. I bet she throws a good party. So I thought I was coming for a party, right? And it is a party for sure. They take really good care of us. We have a really good time. But the first year I came to Triangle Wine Experience, they took us to the Frankie Lemmon School, and we got to meet the kids. And I said, "Oh shit, this is like it's like a bait and switch. Like you think you're coming to have just a good party and whatever, you forget about it the next day. But no, they're like singing their claws into your heart.
They tug your
like,
heartstrings.
Oh my gosh! And they're like, now you're hooked.
Yeah.
Because you meet the kids and you see what the teachers are doing over there, and you see this community of Raleigh and the Triangle, and they have been able to take their community and their sense of community and their commitment to their community and expand it to include all of us. And
Right.
California for sure, strong group of California winemakers, but now you're seeing people coming from France and Italy, and there's a gentleman here from South America pouring his wine. So the expansion of the community here through the action of Triangle Wine Experience and Frankie Lemmon, and through wine, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just been extraordinary. So that's how Ashley,
She was your catalyst.
she was the catalyst.
As
Yeah.
she is for a lot of great things that come down here.
Correct.
But let's just take a minute to honor that the Frankie Lemmon School, which is a school that makes it easier for a lot of these special needs kids and special needs families. So if anybody wants to get involved, you can look on Frankie School. I think FrankieLemmonSchool.org, is it?
Correct.
We'll have to put that in.
FrankieLemmonSchool.org.
Yeah, and even last night we were at the Lyoko dinner, and we heard a woman who has both her kids, unfortunately, had to go through the Frankie Lemmon School, but she was just so happy because that school was available. But it's just for those of you out there, it's expensive. It's expensive to host a school that helps kids with special needs. So if you can donate next year, or you can just go online, or next year get involved in the Triangle Wine
Just
Experience.
have dinner there. That's all you got to do. Just
Yeah,
buy
seriously.
tickets and have dinner. It's like the easiest way to contrip because you have
you
a
get
great
something
time.
back too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the selfish thing to do, but it's amazing. I mean, Eric Surface, one of the investors at St. Rock, was talking about how the state only funds about 20%
Yep.
of what is necessary for for all these kids to be able to be funded.
Appropriate services.
Yeah, so this Triangle Wine Experience is like a 4-day event culminating in a big gala, fundraiser, but I mean, there's just so much awesomeness happening through all of this. I mean, 40 restaurants simultaneously are having a paired dinner with a winery that for the most part comes from California, but yeah, now they're kind of coming from all over the world. And so everybody's working in harmony, in sync together. Then there's always a great little after party at pools. My liver hates me right now. And it's just a good time to come together, and everybody is, everyone's there, yes, to have fun, but they're really there to support this amazing cause.
Yeah. And you know what the cool thing is? Like, not only do we get a who's who like the Jasmine Hirsches of the world and Jim Clendenin and all these great people that Pax Maley, all these really well-regarded winemakers to come down here and be a part of this, but like you have access to these people. You can go up and talk to them. You can come to the parties. All you got to do is like buy a ticket for the dinner and the gala, and then you're there.
And start a podcast and just force Jasmine to come into this room and
or
talk.
That, yeah, or that.
But let's talk about some wine. Let's talk about what you do.
Yeah,
and by the way, your dad is like the Bob Dylan of winemakers and vineyard managers. And
I think he quotes Bob Dylan sometimes.
I think he does. Well,
about the wine.
I'm sure you don't remember because you're traveling all the time, but we actually met at, again, I was a sommelier at Boulay. Thankfully, may he rest in peace, Jean-Luc Ledoux, who was making wine with you guys, who just passed away last month, sadly. He was the head sommelier at Danielle for years when they won Best Wine Program, and then he had Ledoux's, which in Tribeca, New York, was this great wine shop.
I've never seen my father more hungover than after a night with Jean-Luc.
With Jean-Luc, yes.
They were a lot of cognac was consumed. A
Yeah.
lot of rock and roll.
I think I might have been pouring some of that cognac that night. So
it's a very, very sad. I mean,
yeah.
I miss you, Jean-Luc. We all do.
Yeah, he was such a good man. And so he actually brought us together because you guys did a dinner with the wines that he was making at Boulay. And
with Andy Pay, I think.
It might have been there too. Yeah, you're probably right.
Vanessa Wong was there, the winemaker for Pay. That was a great night.
Yes.
I remember it well.
Yes, that's right.
That was
Totally.
a great dinner.
And so I met your father that night, and there is a connection with Bob Dylan there, like something else. Like he quotes him, but is there were they friends? They had met at some point.
My dad's like of that era. I mean, he saw all. He used to go to the jazz fest in New Orleans, and but long before he was in the wine business, he was in the clothing business. But he loved. He's seen Louis Armstrong play, seen Bob Dylan, he's seen all the greats. Just huge, music lover, record collector. I remember being a kid, and my dad would sit and he'd have a drink, and he'd sit in his armchair and he would put records on, and he wouldn't do anything. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He's like, I'm listening to the music.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that with anything anymore. We don't sit and taste the wine. We don't sit and talk to each other. We don't sit and listen to music, and that's my dad. And I think it's generational. And I think we all need to get more back into that. I think we all hunger for it. Yeah.
So talk to us though about the Sonoma Coast, about Hirsch Vineyards. You guys are way out there in this crazy place, literally hanging off the edge of the Pacific or of the Sonoma County into the Pacific Ocean, and making like somewhat cool climate wine out there.
Well, there's so many things to talk about, so we can go in lots of directions. But
just to people that have never maybe heard of your wines before, give them the really
the quick
elevator
overview.
pitch.
So my father bought property on the Sonoma Coast in 1978, and
good year, very good year.
Concept of the Sonoma Coast as a viticultural area did not exist.
Right.
Nobody was growing grapes there. It was first. It was timber. It was all redwood trees. They were cut down long before my dad got there, and then it was sheep and cattle country, and it was poor. And so he bought this ranch for next to nothing because nobody wanted to be out there. It was an old sheep ranch. He bought 1,000 acres of land, and it's crazy to think about it now. And in that sense, my dad was very ahead of his time. I mean, he's from the Bronx.
Thinking,
yeah. I mean, he's from the Bronx. He dropped out of college. He went to Columbia. He's super smart, but he, not really an institution person. So he dropped out of Columbia in his freshman or sophomore year, and he, it was the 60s. He moved to the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is relatively undeveloped, right? But he never lived on a farm.
Well, then you had like Martin Ray and Ridge back then.
And that definitely was part of his entry to Pinot Noir. But he never lived on a farm or a ranch. And it's kind of crazy to think about this, lower middle class working kid from the Bronx.
Right.
Coming up to this ranch, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you stand at Hirsch and you look at the hills, you don't see any other buildings. We're on dirt roads. When he bought the property, we were off the grid for water, which we are to this day. 12-volt electricity.
It's actually probably a good thing, California and water.
You're we're very, very fortunate.
I got my own. I'm good.
Yeah. We're still regulated by the state, but with water, but 12-volt electricity. And a one-room shack. And he looked at this place and thought, oh, this would be a great place to live. Now, my mom, who's from rural Alabama, looked at that place and said, I have spent my entire life trying to get away from places like this. No way. But, my dad, he says now, the place chose me. And that may very well be the case, but he was also receptive to it.
Yeah, he was listening.
Yeah, he's very open to the unknown and to complexity, and that is very helpful for farming Pinot Noir and for farming high-end wine grapes in general. Homogeny is antithetical to complexity in wine. We have a lot of grapes, a lot of vines that have, phylloxera, that have leaf roll virus. These are diseases that you can't get rid of until you replant. And most people, and of course we will at some point tear out and replant, but most people would say, oh, I don't want that in my vineyard. It's lower yields. It's much more difficult to farm. It's vine by vine farming. You can't just get on your tractor and just farm, But that's what gets my father excited, and he has this big capacity for the this complexity. He always says, the original meaning of the word perfect does not mean without flaw. It means complete. So it must include the imperfect. And I think when you taste a lot of wine now, the wines are so fucking perfect. Can I use that word?
Of course.
Perfect?
We're not.
Perfect?
Fine.
Yeah, perfect's okay, right? They're so boring.
Yeah.
And
homogenized.
And it's very interesting when you taste wine with older wine drinkers, people who've been drinking for a long time and drank a lot of wines, from the 70s and the 80s, before things really got perfect in the modern sense, They had a lot higher tolerance for botrytis in Chardonnay. They had a lot higher tolerance for Brett in red wines, and we don't have that tolerance anymore because most of us don't, because the wines that are made now they're so clean because we have really good enology. And for the most part, modern wine science is a boon to us as drinkers, but it also means that there's a lot of wines that are just so lacking in individuality. And I think Pinot Noir is not a grape that lends itself to being a wild wine. Rustic Pinot Noir is not really that interesting. Syrah can be this super noble, Shah of Hermitage, and then it can also be this rustic village, Saint-Joseph,
smoky, meaty.
Right, and it can really play both sides. I don't think that's true.
Pinot wants to wear the elegant dress every day.
Pinot wants to wear a nice dress, right? It's more of a Grace Kelly, but it should have this very contained individuality and a certain element of wildness. So our site can produce wines that do have tannin. And that's a bit unusual, I'd say, in New World Pinot Noir. And it's super, super important. And we want to foster that and protect it. And that's one reason why we pick a little bit on the earlier side, relatively speaking, is to preserve that tannin. So, but that all of those priorities really come from my father and his spirit and his expansiveness in regards to this kind of thing.
So that style also then kind of breeds to something that was important in your life. Weren't you very instrumental in creating In the Pursuit of Balance? And
it was, Raj and I co-founded In Pursuit of Balance. We call it IPOB for short.
Raj Parr, you're talking about.
Raj Parr.
Who's
not Raj from What's Happening.
Directed Michael Mina beverage restaurants and also makes Sandy wines now.
And Domaine de la Côte.
And every sommelier looks up to him.
Just an awesome, really important person in our industry, and somebody I love dearly. It really came about because when I started working for my father in 2008, I had just spent a couple years in New York. I was working in finance. I did not love my job, and a lot of my happiness came from spending late nights out drinking Burgundy. And because of my dad, I had met some collectors and sommeliers, and so I wasn't working in the wine business, but got to kind of enjoy some of the wine community, and people are so generous. Collectors, they, kind of by nature, I think, whether you collect stamps or, I don't know, panda carcasses or, wine, you're sort of like, it's
like
kind
that
of
your brain went to panda
solitary,
carcasses.
I was trying to think of some charismatic megafauna that everybody loves. It's really not.
It's panda carcasses.
I shouldn't talk negative about pandas, but, biodiversity
Fuck those pandas.
is more
It's
important.
about time somebody took a stand against those vegetarian puffballs.
I mean, they're eating all the bamboo, and they're just the
How
worst.
dare they?
Procreate for once, will you?
Stop being
Damn
so
celibate
cute.
pieces
Get
of
a
shit.
job. Yeah. Anywho, I just think that collecting is kind of a solitary activity. It's something, by its nature, whatever it is that you collect. But wine is not that. It's so much better when you get some people around the table that can get excited about what you're excited about. And you really see that, I think, in wine collecting, even though it can also be kind of,
Daunting and erudite.
Well, right, and I just showing off my bottle's bigger than your bottle, that kind of thing. But I have to say, there's so much generosity within the wine community and the wine collecting community. So I just got to drink all these great Burgundies. I come home to California and I start tasting my family's wines, and I'm like, I don't really love these wines. And what's up with California Pinot Noir? And Raj was like, well, there are some, like Literai and a Bon Climat, that are making Pinot Noirs in California that are evocative of what we look for in Burgundy. They're not Burgundies.
Right.
We're not trying to make Burgundy in California. It'd be un-Burgundian to try to make Burgundy in California, but looking for that sense of place and that transparency and that elegance. So, we said, well, what if we get all these people together in a room? Because, we didn't create the style. The style, or we didn't, and I want to say, too, for me, it's not about style. It's about intention.
Yeah.
And then you got to pick a style, settle on a style that supports your intention. Freddie Mounier has been quoted as saying that he has no style. He's a great Burgundy winemaker, for your listeners who aren't familiar with his wines. And I think that's bullshit. I think that sounds like a lot of marketing, but what I think he means is very true, which is that you have to strip away in order for terroir to shine, right? But in and of itself, there's choices that you make in your winemaking so that terroir can shine that do end up kind of being something that we might call style. So my dad is agnostic to style. He drinks Amarone, big, rich red wines one night, and the next night he'll be drinking Chassagne Rouge, a village Pinot Noir that you could read a book through. Super light, delicate red wines. And so I'm very narrow in what I like to drink. I think this is another part of this generational thing. But the reason we, over the years, the first few years I started to work at Hirsch, the reason we changed our style, air quotes, was because I said to my dad, I said, look, ripeness, excessive ripeness is a homogenizer. And when we're trying to make individual wines that express all these crazy individual soils that we have at Hirsch, because we're right on the San Andreas Fault, if they all converge on these big, monolithic, homogeneous fruit flavors, they're all going to taste the same. So if we pick a little earlier, we can preserve the difference. And what's the point of wine if it all tastes the same? Why are we all excited about wine? Because it's endlessly, curious, endlessly interesting, endlessly different. So we need to promote and celebrate difference. We need to all stop planting the same international varieties everywhere. I mean, we're guilty of that. We grow Pinot Noir, but the whole purpose of Pinot Noir is to express place. So, in pursuit of balance, the organization, I think there was a diversity of styles in the room, but everybody was committed to making wines that were honest and evocative of the vineyard.
I want to just, for our listeners that might not understand what you were just saying in terms of technical,
Dumb it down, Matt.
Yeah, when you make wine on a very basic level, the longer you leave it on the vine, the higher sugar levels, the higher potential alcohol, the more, let's say for the sake of argument, the more sexy a wine can be. It can be powerful, it can have a lot of alcohol. But as you leave it on the vine longer, acidity goes down. So you have less structure in the wine, less freshness in the wine, less of those fresh fruit flavors, let's say. And so you're having, like you say, a more homogenized version because everything just tastes high alcohol, sugary, and sweet.
Yeah, it's when people say, oh, this is flabby. Like, what does that mean? It's like, well, it's just like if you didn't go to the gym for as long as I haven't gone to the gym, you get flabby. But if you work out all the time and you got a nice, six-pack going in a grape, it's going to have a little bit of sugar, but it's also going to have some acid. It's going to have some tannin. It's going to have everything that you kind of want because it's worked out.
Yeah, it's complexity. And at the end of the day, like you said, it shows off the place.
We partnered up with Triangle Wine Company because these guys are awesome. They offer weekly wine tasting events, a wide range of wine and beers from around the world, and an easy online store to find the wines that you'd like. They also offer pickup, local delivery, and shipping. We even set up a promo code NCFB so you can receive 10% off all future purchases.
Go to trianglewineco.com or one of their 3 locations, and for $99, pick up the NC F&B 6-pack, which includes 3 white wines, 3 red wines, and we threw in an official NC F&B hat in the bag.
So once again, buy your wine online or in-store at the Triangle Wine Company and use our promo code NCFB during checkout to receive 10% off your future wine and beer purchases. Go to trianglewineco.com or click the top of our website at ncfbpodcast.com.
Hi, this is Mike Coscarelli from Anxiety Now.
And Andrea Allen from the Hot Mess Comedy Hour.
We just launched the brand new OG Podcast Network and wanted to let you know that you can hear ours and other great shows by going to ogpodcastnetwork.com.
Also, be sure to follow the network on social media to keep up to date with new shows, videos, and live events.
That's at OG Podcasts on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Or you can subscribe to your favorite OG podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
So intention, to go back to style, to distill that down also, it's like my intention then as a winemaker is to make the best expression of this vineyard as I possibly can. So in order to do that, I can't really have a style, but then it might manifest itself in a style and like what you do to find out that your initial intention.
Well, it's fascinating because I think, first of all, we're in the new world, right? My dad always says, remember the adjective. It's new. So how do we know what's the best expression of this site? And I think when we go to the traditional wine growing regions of the world and they're still experimenting, let us take note because, we think we know so much in the new world about our sites and everything. It's like we don't know shit all. And this question of what is the wine that will most encapsulate and highlight the specificity of this little vineyard. I was in the Nahe, which is in Germany, a great Riesling growing region outside of Frankfurt, and at Donhof, one of the best winemakers in the region, they had taken this Grand Cru vineyard and they had made sweet wine from it and they had made Grosses Gewächs, they'd made dry wine. From the same vintage, from the same vineyard. And I was totally confounded by this. I said, well, what's the terroir of this vineyard? Is it supposed to be a sweet wine or a dry wine? And to be honest, he gave me an answer that I don't think I was satisfied by because I don't know exactly what the answer was. But I think the thinking about it now, what's extraordinary about that vineyard was the amount of ripeness it could achieve. That they could then make either the fact that they had the choice. It was incredibly far north. But I think the point being, that idea of the dry Grand Cru wines is new in Germany.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're exploring and playing with that, partly for marketing reasons, because there's less of an appetite out in the world for sweet wines anymore. So they're partly driven by necessity. But I just thought, wow, that's so amazing. You have this place where people have been growing grapes for 1,000 years, probably about, and they're still trying to figure it out. So we don't know. Yeah. But what I will tell you is we have a 68-acre vineyard that is divided into 60 parcels, 60, which is a crazy degree of fragmentation. An acre is not that big. And it's driven by us being on top of a fault line. So this is young land. You've got clay, rock, sand, loam, and all the mixtures and all the different aspects. And the only way to farm it is to farm it in these little parcels because they're all different and they respond differently. So you got to kind of figure out what each one needs. And then, the reason my dad, who's a farmer, decided to build a winery, which he's really not very interested in. He's not really interested in winemaking. He said, he decided to build a winery to become a better farmer. He said, I want to taste each of the little 60 blocks. And so when you go in the cellar at Hirsch, you can taste 60 little wines, all from the Hirsch vineyard, from the same vintage, from the same winemaker. And if they all taste the same, but they're all different, what are you doing?
Right.
What's
you're not
the
doing
point?
a good job farming
So
them.
pull back. Well, you're not doing a good job on your picking decisions, and they're all taste the same because you've made them in such a ripe, over-the-top, extracted way. Now, what if you were to find a way to make the wines where you preserved the specificity of each block, yet they're still delicious? They can still be sexy, actually. And then you have the feedback from the wine that says, okay, this parcel actually really, this is what's going on over here, and this one is more fruity, and this one is more earthy, and this has this interesting like piney thing going on, and this one, wow, look at the like sexy tannins over here. And then you really start to like learn about your site. And my dad knew so much about the vineyard before he ever made wine, but he became a better farmer when we started to make our wines.
Right.
And, make our own wines. And I think that's the ultimate feedback from farming is the wine. And so we got to make the wines in a way that allows us to actually see the vineyard and see our farming decisions, and then put that information back in next vintage.
Yeah.
So if we're homogenizing the wines through any of our choices, we're losing that opportunity. And as drinkers, all the wines are going to taste the same, and that's boring.
Right.
So
And just to wrap that up, that goes back to the intention of, it's true, we are the new world, but your dad, especially at this time, knows when he's farmed in a good year because the wine is then expressing itself. So when you've done 40 vintages, and I know it's 40 vintages because you said he bought it in 1978, which was a great year, which was a year I was born, and I know I just turned 40. So, but then you do have knowledge to be like, wow, that year was great. So, but then I would assume then your style means you go back to like, okay, what did I do? What was my technique in the vineyard or in the winery to like somewhat recreate that or get that expression again?
Well, it's interesting because, the same winery in the Naha, the father of the son who I was tasting with, Helmut Donhoff, there's a quote attributed to him. He said, if God was just, he would give winemakers every vintage twice. But, we don't get every vintage twice.
Right.
Every vintage once. And I think that some vintages are alike. But everything's changing all the time. The vines are getting older. The weather's changing. Now the climate's changing too, right? We're changing.
Well, not according to some people. It's not changing the climate.
But certainly the weather's changing.
Everything's great.
You can say the climate is the same. It's just weather, right? So, yeah.
And you got to sometimes just put a flag in the sand and say, okay, we're going to do Pinot. Like, yes, I got to let this area speak to me, and we're going to do something, but you also have to make decisions. You have to choose what you're going to do. So there is a little bit of a style, there is a little bit of an idea, and then from whatever you pick, you react to what happens. And your dad has done it like it has an exceptional way for so long. So it's always a pleasure. If you're going to get a Hirsch Vineyards wine, no matter what label's on it, it's going to be a damn good wine.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. Real quick, couple things before we get out of here. So you were in finance before you came back to work for your dad?
That's a fancy word for it. I was in private banking.
Okay. Yeah, you were in finance. So what brought you? Because the reason I'm asking, just before we walked in here, we were privy to a pretty cool conversation about you talking about you having a say in how the wine's made and why you couldn't go to BevCon because that's when a lot of the harvest is done. And if you don't have a seat at the table, you literally don't have a seat at the table. So 2 questions. Your name's on the label also. So how much say do you have on the wine? How does that work? And then, how did you decide let me get in on Dad's business?
Well, the second question in regards to how I came to work for my father, I just really wasn't enjoying my job in finance in New York City, and I was complaining about it to my friend Bernie Sun, who used to run wine for Jean-Georges.
Yep.
For all his U.S. restaurants, and very, very impressive person who I am honored to call a friend and really look up to.
Smart enough to hire Aldo Sam as well. Yeah.
Yes. He gave Aldo his job.
Yeah.
So Bernie said, quit complaining. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I love food and wine. And he said, well, go work for your dad. And I said, I can't go work for my dad. That's dumb, right? We're Americans. None of this nepotism stuff. And he said, you're being an idiot. Your dad's doing something really important. You should go home and help him. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was at a point in my life where I was just like, I was really unhappy, and I think I was feeling sorry for myself. And I didn't feel motivated to go out and figure out what to do. And having that person that I respected, that third party outside the family, saying, not only is it okay to go home and work for your family, but you should.
Yeah.
And
I got to talk to Bernie more.
Yeah.
Nobody ever gives me concrete advice.
Yeah.
It's always like, well, what do you think you should do? Or how are you feeling about that? No.
Thanks, therapist. I just gave you a bunch of money. Tell me what to do.
What the fuck is the right what's the right answer?
I
Damn
think
it.
it's also like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but, Bernie's Chinese, and he had no time for my self-pity.
Right.
And he said, quit that.
I got
and
shit to do. Here's what you should do.
Yeah, and he said, don't be an idiot. Go work for your father. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's the best thing I've ever done. And the most rewarding thing I've ever done is work for my father.
Do you have siblings?
I do.
Are they involved?
No, but my younger brother works in wine and loves wine. He works for Planner in New York City. My brother Joe.
Yeah, Dougie P.
Yeah, and he does an amazing job. I'm so proud of him. He's an incredible, member of the wine community in New York City, and loves wine. And my sister is in real estate and not super interested in wine, but she has kids, so that's the real family business right there, right? So she's got.
And somehow, when somebody buys a new house, they get a bottle of Hirsch as their welcoming
She's
gift.
spreading the good word.
Yeah.
And then in regards to your question about affecting the wines, I'm not a winemaker.
Right.
I'm not a farmer. I'm the general manager of our winery, but I'm younger than our winemaker. And less experienced than, and younger than our vineyard manager, and much less experienced. Our vineyard manager, Everardo Robledo, has been with us for almost 30 years. He lives on site. He's raised 4 kids there. He's still raising 2 of them. So if I want to be taken seriously when we have conversations about farming decisions leading up to harvest or picking decisions, I got to be there. And I do all of our sales, which requires a lot of travel.
Yeah,
and
you're everywhere. Like, following your Instagram feed is gives me, hurts my neck.
Anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah, you get miles though on United just for following me on Instagram. So now
seriously, how do I cash in on those? Yeah.
So it's just, that's the thing. There's no such thing as armchair farming. There's no such thing as armchair, living. Right? If you want to, I think Woody Allen or somebody said, it's like, if you don't show up, you've missed life. I forget he's a much better quote about it than I do, but so I got, come middle of August, I stay home so that I can be a part of that and learn, frankly.
What are some of those decisions that are being made and those conversations that are happening that you want to have a say in specifically?
Well, thinning, which is a farming practice that we do before we pick, where we go into the vineyard and we actually cut fruit off.
Yeah.
And you have to do it before the fruit is finished coloring up, because if you wait, then it all is the same color and you can't distinguish what you want to cut off and what you want to leave. And the winery is, we're really focused on quality, and so sometimes that means cutting fruit off. And the vineyard, you grow the grapes, sometimes there's an emotional thing where it's hard to cut fruit off. And so there's usually some back and forth between Everardo and our winemaker about how much we're going to drop off. And, I want to be there to hear both sides, because, and then kind of
be like an arbitrator.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But also just kind of understand, this is really what we need to do. Now, this year, 2017, this past harvest, it was really, we had a heat wave coming. And our vineyard manager was very anxious to finish the thinning, because he said, if we don't finish now, everything's going to color up and we're going to run out of time because we're going to have to start picking. Same guys that do the thinning do the picking. So he was urging our winemaker, Anthony, you got to let me know. But Anthony said, you know what? I'm looking at all the different blocks, and unusually this year, all of the blocks were a little closer together in terms of ripeness. So Anthony's thinking, wow, all this fruit's going to get ripe at the same time. And we don't have enough guys to pick it. We don't have enough people in the winery to process it. So stop thinning. because the more fruit you leave, the more it'll slow it down. Now, that's a crazy thing for a vineyard manager to hear from a winemaker. You don't want me to drop fruit. You want to actually leave the fruit. So it was this really interesting. And then when Anthony explained to Averado why he wanted fruit left, Averado was like, okay, awesome. Like, we're going to go work on other things. And we still were doing, obviously, some thinning, some fine-tuning and whatever, but it was really, because I was like, Anthony, don't we need to, like, So it was such an incredible learning experience. And it comes to this thing that every vintage is different. And if you're not there in the vineyard, making those critical decisions that 24 hours can make a huge difference, then you're going to miss it. And great wine is 1,000 little tiny decisions, to quote Jean-Marc Rouleau. So if you miss one of those little decisions, okay, fine. But if you miss 10 of them, you miss 100 of them, you're not making great wine anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I felt like I was in the room for those decisions right now. That was amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing us in.
No, thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, say hello to California
awesome.
for us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah,
My
people
pleasure.
go follow. What's your handle?
Just Jasmine Hirsch.
Jasmine Hirsch.
HIRSCH.
Yeah.
Or Hirsch Vineyards.
Yeah.
And go follow their wine. Learn about great Pinot Noir coming out of Sonoma Coast. Today, we are visited by Daniel Lewis, president of the Outer Banks Restaurant Association, and also the proprietor of 3 great restaurants out there: Coastal Provisions, Cravings Steak and Seafood, and Coastal Cantina. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're a busy man.
I am.
We've got the 2018 OBX Taste of the Beach Festival happening over the weekend of the 22nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Correct.
And so we're going to be there as judges, and we might get our hands dirty and play around with some cocktails. But Dan, let's talk about what's going on with that festival and why everybody should show up.
Sure. Well, the Taste of the Beach started probably more than 25 years ago on the Outer Banks as a wintertime locals event. And with the advent of the food culture, Food Network and all that, and additional festivals coming on board, the then president saw what was going on in Charleston with the wine and food festival that's going on down there, and decided to make the Taste of the Beach more than just a single event. So about 2008, I believe, was the first year we switched it to a 4-day event, invited all of the members to host their own events like wine dinners or tapas crawls or whatnot, and still have it culminate it with a big grand tasting, as we call it, which is more the traditional where all the chefs get together and do their foods and beverages.
So the grand tasting is on Sunday. That's kind of the end of the event, and that's where it culminates. But prior to that, leading up, what are a couple of big events that everybody would be excited about?
Well, we host a couple big events on Friday. We have the Barbecue and Wings Showdown, sponsored by Cisco Foods and Smithfield's, kicking in a bunch of pork for us as well.
Judged by Max and Matt of the NC F&B podcast.
We hope so.
As well.
Are you ready for some pork?
Can we have a preview right now?
Unfortunately, no. Actually, so we got that going on Friday afternoon, and that's over across the bridge on Currituck mainland.
Nice.
And then Saturday at my place, I actually host one of the larger events, is the Chowder Cook-Off, which is about 10 years running. We have about 600 people in for that. About a dozen to 18 or so chowder participants on that. And then Sunday, as you mentioned, the grand tasting.
Cool. And to get tickets, can you get a full pass to attend anything, or is it you have to buy individually?
Yeah, all the tickets are available on the website, which is obxtasteofthebeach.com. They are all sold individually, so you can pick and choose at your leisure. As far as if you're only going to be down for 1 or 2 days, you can pick like the Friday, Saturday events. Hopefully, you can stay for the full 4 days. We do have a few events that start on Thursday night as well.
Okay. If you want to be centrally located, where should you stay?
The grand tasting is going to be held at the Hilton Garden Inn in Kitty Hawk, and that's pretty much centrally located. You have the northern beaches, the Duck and Corolla restaurant events north of there, and then anything south, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, Nag's Head south of there.
So we're going to get started Thursday, March 22nd, and it's going to run Thursday, Friday, Saturday, finish on Sunday, the 25th. So go to obxtasteofthebeach.com, look for the event that suits you best, and hit us up on social while you're there, and maybe we'll give you a little shout out and say hi. So
maybe even pour you a drink.
The website's really set up nicely. You can have search function. So if you want to search by specific restaurant or type of an event, whether it be a tapas crawl or a wine dinner or a specific area, for those of you that might even be interested in hanging out at the Outer Banks for a season or a little longer, we actually also just added a restaurant job board as well. So you can actually go to the Obra tab and find a job.
The work.
Yeah, exactly.
We can use that.
Hanging on the coast.
Yeah, you guys want to hang out for the season? Help us out.
We might just podcast from out there and eat some great oysters. And
I'm going to need a grand suite at the Sanderling.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can make that happen. Not.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for giving us your time right here. We will see you in a couple weeks. Matt, what do you got?
Thanks, Daniel. This has been really great to learn about it, and I, for one, am very much looking forward to joining. So,
great, my pleasure.
Everybody, go to obxtasteofthebeach.com. Come out and join us on the Outer Banks from the weekend of March 22nd to the 25th, and you will eat and drink very merrily.
Well, we are back at the Triangle Wine Experience. Who do we have in studio now, Matt?
So, it has been a who's who, but this is potentially the biggest fish in the pond here. We mentioned him on our last edition of our interviews with Jasmine was talking about Mr. Raj Parr. I think, what did you call him?
He's the guy that every som looks up to.
Yeah. I think that's dead on.
I wish.
You have so many projects going on. Sandy Wines, right?
Yep.
Are you still involved with Michael Mina? You're still the corporate beverage director there, yeah.
Not as involved. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And
thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure being in Raleigh and being a part of the Triangle Wine Experience.
Yeah.
I still work on Michael, but mostly on new projects.
Okay.
And things, just development things and not as involved as I was back in the day, but slowly getting more and more involved back since I was busy setting up, San the Evening Land and doing the La Côte. And now that they've kind of been set up and we know the wines you make and distribution is kind of pretty much all set up, so I have some time to do other things and definitely been working with Michael since 2002, so it's just hard to completely let go. So
yeah, but it's probably good for both of you to be involved with each other still at this point.
Oh, for sure. It's a long relationship, 15 years. So
is this like the new trend? You work at very high-level beverage programs of well-known restaurateurs, and then eventually you just start making your own wine? Is that the thing? We were kidding, because we had Jordan Salcido on recently, and then, of course, Patrick Capiello was on when we were at BevCon, and that's kind of like a cool...
well, I would say probably like you and Greg Herring. Maybe Greg was like the first to really like branch out and be successful.
Yeah, before Greg, actually, the very first was, again, people might know him, he was... Michael Bonacorsi.
Right.
He was at Spago, and if you're living in California, you have an edge because the vineyards are right there. So between 2004 and 2008, I made some wine with Jim Clendenin. It was a 4-hour drive from me to Aubon Clément, and then after 2009 till 2013, I was working on RS-74 the floor every day, and then in end of 2013, I moved to Santa Barbara to live there full time and be near the vineyards and just more involved. You have to be there. You have to be right at the source. It's difficult. It's like I don't call myself a sommelier because sommeliers work on restaurant floors. I don't. I oversee a team of people who kind of do a great job, and I kind of help them in a way. So it's I make wine, and if you make wine, you're in the winery, in the vineyard. You're close to the source. If you're going to be a sommelier, you're going to be on the restaurant floor. So it's a very clear cut. But I kind of do, in a way, do both, just to kind of. Because one job is like, you can't leave something you've done for so long.
Right.
And you can, but you don't want to because you're so attached to it. So,
was this part of the game plan for you when you were a kid? Did you know or think you were ever going to be a winemaker?
Nothing. Not even close. I wanted to be a chef, and I ended up becoming a sommelier. And then I was making a little bit of wine just for fun, just to kind of check it out, see what how to grow grapes, make wine. It was completely just a small hobby learning experience, and then we found the right place where which now is Domaine de la Côte, and Then we had a chance to take over Seven Springs Estate in Oregon, and couldn't say no to that. And, it just kind of went from there.
Domaine de la Côte is your newest project, right?
Well, Domaine de la Côte was planted in 2007. We acquired it in 2012.
Okay.
In its entirety. Sandy was before that.
Yeah.
Sandy started in 2009. So it all happened around the same time. And then Evening Land was the last one, which we took over in 2014. So what we have right now is 2014 Chardonnay from Evening Land. So that's our first vintage of a historic estate, which has been around since the early 80s, actually. So.
Yeah, and for those people, it's interesting because, and I asked you earlier offline what the clone is of this, and so for those of you that think that Matt's about to get into wine geek speak, just bear with me for a second, because I like talking about Oregon Chardonnay, because for a long time, Oregon Chardonnay, for lack of a better word, was fucked up because they were planting on the wrong clone, so it didn't really fit the soil or the matter. But now that's pretty much been rectified all around, where now we're seeing some, just out there, Jim Clendenin was joking, he was like, oh, I don't like Chardonnay from Oregon, and then he tasted yours and he was like, oh, I gotta X that out of the old vocabulary.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's going to get more and more interesting in the coming years, because a lot of producers are now focusing on Chardonnay from the right places, growing the right way, better viticulture, of course, better plant material, and then in the end, good winemaking. So all of it will, I think, produce wines like this in the future for sure. Okay.
And so essentially you have 3 different projects with winemaking.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
actually I have
more than that.
A couple more which are kind of smaller. One is called Combe. It's a small project with Pete Stolpman.
Okay.
From Stolpman in Ballard Canyon. So that's
fantastic vineyard. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
making Syrah with him, or
no? We have a little Trousseau, Trousseau Noir, and we have some Chenin Blanc.
Nice.
So we do that with him, and then me and Sashi then play around, make some other small different fun things. Which we're starting a small wine club this year. It's gonna be, we have everything from Napa Valley Cabernet, Merlot, some Syrah, some Mondouse, Pinot blend, just different things, just some fun wines, and so we always keep it interesting. And
you're talking about Sashi Mormon, who's your business partner in this.
Yes, my business partner, and
So Raj, for the people that might not know of you, and we've given you your due introduction, just tell us a little bit about how you came up, and you said you wanted to be a chef, but then you became a sommelier, and how did you kind of rise to become corporate beverage director of Michael Mina?
I'll keep it short. So I was born in India, in Calcutta, and since I was little, I wanted to be a chef. So I went to hotel school in India, and then I started to cook there, and I came to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York in 94, graduated, fell in love with wine at the same time, and started working at a Rubicon restaurant with Larry Stone, my mentor and a really good friend, and I worked with him for 3 years. Then I started working at another restaurant in San Francisco called Fifth Floor, met Michael Mina there, and then Michael and myself started talking, and he had these plans to start this company and build the Mina Group, and we started working together in late 2002, and then in the whole process, I kind of fell in love with, growing grapes, making wine, and all these things happened. Opened RN74, which was our homage to Burgundy, and that restaurant, we just closed it last October, but that had a good 8-year run. Wrote a book with Jordan McKay, Secrets of Sommelier. That was released in 2011, and we just finished our new book. Will be released in October of 2018, called The Atlas of Taste.
Nice.
So just, all these things have happened, and met amazing people, and just, I still travel a bunch, and
you're everywhere.
Yeah, where is your home at this point?
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I live there.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned it. Yeah.
I probably spend less than 100 days a year there, but those 100 days are precious. And it's pretty amazing to meet so many amazing people around the world, and talk wine and talk food, and just
What was your contribution to the Triangle Wine Experience over this weekend?
I'm here for very short because we had some stuff happening in Santa Barbara. I couldn't get away, so I came here last night. Had a dinner. Had a wine dinner with Richard Betts and Carla.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a dinner at Sono.
Oh yeah,
and it was great. And that was that. Today this, and then I'm doing a little tasting at the Raleigh Wine Shop after this.
Nice.
And tomorrow in the afternoon I'm heading off to Europe. So,
how many years have you been coming down here for this?
This is I was here 2 years ago. It's my second time here.
Second time. And so, how'd you get involved to begin with?
Through PAX, and then PAX met Eliza and.
Speaking of Pax Mali, and he's been on our podcast back when we were down in
BevCon, yeah.
BevCon. We had a nice little forum chat with John Bonet, Grayson Schmid, Patrick Cappiello, and Pax Mali.
Yeah.
Talking Syrah with people all over the country. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, no, he's a dear friend, and so he's we try to do some events together, and he's like, you got to come down to Raleigh. I'm like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, your wine is well received down here, and people are into it. And so, what would you say what do you tell? I'm sure you get asked this all the time. Other sommeliers who want to make their own wine, or who want to do that transition.
Well, first of all, if you're going to make the wine, then you got to be there and make the wine. Unless you want someone else to make the wine, that's fine too. But spend time in the place you're going to make wine. If you're going to make wine in New York State, or if you're going to make wine in Virginia or in California, Oregon, Washington, you got to be there. You got to be close to the fruit source. You got to, be there to the whole process, and really because the wine is a reflection of you. If you taste any of our wines, and if you know me, if you know Sashi, they're reflections of us. They're not. These wines are, the wines are characterized after people. And if you're going to make wine, it better be a very personal wine, because that's very important. Not just a wine you put your label on and say, this is my wine.
Right.
But just be connected and, make wine for the right reason, not necessarily to, make a lot of wine or make a lot of money. That's not the idea. The idea is to make a wine that makes a difference, make a wine that really is from the place. So, yeah.
I think at the end of the day, and this has been reminding me a lot, it's a wine that you yourself would drink. And we talked, that was one of the main takeaways I got from our wine forum back in BevCon, is that Pax and Patrick and John, I like to get to the entry points of when movement started. And both Pax and Patrick were saying, we weren't drinking our own wine.
If it was a party, you'd show up with something from the Rhone, and
that was later when you and I were talking with Pax the other night at a great party. But they were saying,
and he ripped off that Saint Joseph wine label.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
but no, they were saying we have it's like almost scary, because you have this arguably great world-class vineyards in your backyard, and you're not drinking the stuff that you're making there because your style is not what you prefer. So it's like, make the wine that you want to drink.
Yeah,
for sure.
And maybe it's easier said than done. You got to understand how to do it in this environment. Like if you're in California, how do we make these wines taste like old world wine? So you have to be pretty smart and heady about the winemaking process.
Yeah,
but it's also taking dedication to figure out that path is the important aspect of it.
Yeah, and I also think it's a business decision, right? Because people are making wines of the fashion, obviously, and what's getting scores? Well, a guy like Rajat Parr is tasting hundreds of wines, sitting down in one setting. Well, what's going to stick out? The ones that the flashiest, the ones that's the highest in alcohol is going to stick out. And remember, when you're tasting hundreds of wines, so that's like, okay, so Scores sells wines, and now I got to get big scores. So how do I get big scores? I make big flashy wine, and then it's just it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, no, it's
but you don't do that. You make wines that are very personal to you, and
for sure. That's our number one goal, is to kind of course, make the wine from the place and make the wine which, we would actually drink. Because, I don't know. That's just, maybe it's cliche, but it's, for us, it's true. We actually enjoy these wines, and we don't drink much of our wines. Actually, it's very rare. At home, never. I'll taste a current vintage or an older vintage just to kind of taste it, or in a blind tasting or something, but never, I drink other wines because I want to be exposed to what other people are doing, and that's important.
And you're tasting your wines often, I imagine, when you're blending, right?
Yeah, we don't do that many blendings, unfortunately, because we have a single parcels. Yeah, we do some blending and we taste them, but if you taste them in barrel tasting, if you're tasting with customers or friends, but other than that, not necessarily a bottle or something. It's very rarely I'll open something just to kind of taste and then to move on to, the next wine.
What's it like to be an Indian person in the wine community?
Oh, it's funny. I've never thought of that because
you've only been Indian the whole time you've been in the wine community.
I guess, but it was, it's the wine community is very, very open, very liberal. That's one thing. There's of course a lot of racial tension around the country these days. Honestly, I've never felt anything and any of that. It's just been a very open and very engaging and very liberal kind of community. And, because after all, we're just drinking and eating and chatting. And, it's amazing to meet so many people and become friends. And India is a big part of my life because I was born there. And,
Do you go back?
I used to go back every year when my father was alive. I now don't go back that often. My mom comes visits me once a year, but it's it's the reason I can taste the way I taste or cook whatever is because of how I grew up and where I grew up. So it's all those aromas and smells and cooking when you're young. So all these things have made me who I am. So I can't forget that.
Because traditional Indian cooking has just such a variety of different flavors that you wouldn't normally get if you're American.
Yeah, it's very different than you'll make one dish and it could have 10 different spices in it.
Right. Oh, last night we went to the Lyoko dinner at St. Rock, and that coconut curry soup had 3 different curries or whatever, and it was creamy and spicy and all exotic at the same time. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any wine being made in India?
Yeah. There's Sula is the big winery there. They make Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc and a few others, but the consumption is very little because
the culturally
whiskey and beer and.
But they say that, I'm giving my secrets away. My future plan to become a extremely rich mogul, but they say that the future is in actually exports to India because that the drinking culture is growing. Plus, you have a huge tourism culture.
The drinking culture is huge. Indians can drink you on the table.
Right.
It's huge. The culture is there. It's just the export. The import duties are so high, so you're paying 200%.
Right.
So one day that's going to come to an end.
But isn't there a loophole? If you sell to private clubs or a hotel, something you don't get the tax. I can't remember.
Yeah, there is a loophole, but you won't be able to get mass public then. You'll be only getting the wines to the fine hotels and restaurants, but you want to get to everyone.
Do you sell your wines at all in India? No.
No, I have a guy who's working on something, and I believe he'll eventually get there, and then we'll do it because
put me in on that export company. All right.
All right. So
I'm in for $5, definitely.
Done.
All right. Nice.
But this is fantastic, Raj. Thank you so much for coming on in, spending some time with us. We'll get back out there. I'm going to just follow you wherever you go. Whoever you're tasting wine, I'm just going to go with. I want whatever he's tasting. But thanks for coming down here. Thanks for coming to North Carolina and being a part of the Triangle Wine Experience and being on the NC F&B podcast, Matt.
Absolutely. It speaks to large volumes for what we're doing here and the good cause. The fact that somebody as busy as you and travels as much takes their time to come to this event. So thanks.
No, it's my pleasure. It's great being here. Thank you.
And delicious wine, by the way. So we'll put some links up on our show notes, and you'll be able to figure out where you can access some of the wines.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.
My name is Robin Bodwin. I work with Proof Wine and Spirits. I'm a wine sales rep. I spend a lot of time in my car. And you know what I do in my car? I listen to the NC F&B podcast. That's how you find out where all the hot restaurants are. Max and Matt, keep it real. Listen all the time. Love you.